Okay, so I want to dig a little deeper on some of the connections between galectin-3 and specific diseases, physiological symptoms, mechanisms, systems. Um, One that I'd like you to talk about is cancer. Another one is atherosclerosis. And I'd also then like you to talk about the connection with mitochondria and energy production.
No, of course. So the whole research on galectin-3 started with cancer. What they found out, and it was really interesting, what they found out is that galectin-3 drives angiogenesis. It drives the metastatic process. There are galectin-3 receptors on the endothelium that the cancer cells and thrombocytes attach to, and they create a colony. They produce inflammation, they break the blood vessels, and they create colony. This was the starting point. And interesting enough, Ari, the first study on this showing that in animals, when you injected prostate cancer to their hip and you gave modified cytospectin, you were able to dramatically reduce metastasis in the lungs. There was never a study on any substance, pharmaceutical or natural, that was demonstrated this. This was published in JNCI, Journal of National Cancer Institute. And somebody just asked me in an interview this week, asked, how come everybody doesn't know about it? And I said, if this was a drug, everybody would have known about it, right?
Yeah.
So this was the initial observation. And then when I was ready, when they published my first data on MCP and prostate cancer, there was an interesting observation. So the data was published in the journal Prostate, very prestigious as a statistical method. And then the actual result was were published in another oncology journal. In the prostate, there were 9 out of 12 patients had response. In 2 of them, the primary tumor got smaller. But these patients were excluded by the physician assistant because said it's impossible that MCP will affect the primary tumor. And then a few months, kind of interesting, right? A few months later, Avram Raz came with another article in JNCI showing that there's an inhibition of angiogenesis and effect on the primary tumor. So galectin-3 drives the growth of the primary tumor. It blocks apoptosis of cancer cells. It activates BCL2, which is a very aggressive metastatic gene in cancer, and it promotes the metastatic process. And interesting enough, I am presenting in this interview is taking place in early February. I'm presenting in about 10 days in ASCO GU, our multi-center trial on biochemical relapse of prostate cancer on 60 patients with 90% benefit over 18 months. But I never thought about using MCP on metastatic disease. It looked to me, wow, but interesting. In Israel, the same principal investigator, this is a population who doesn't do supplement, doesn't do anything. They gave to people with metastatic prostate cancer who didn't want to go through the hormonal therapy, they gave them MCP. And the results were so surprising. I mean, kind of amazing. And now I think we have a few dozens of them. So we're going to publish the data. This is really going to create like a wow, I think, how a natural substance can do this.
What
So
were the results?
we are seeing we are seeing people with metastatic cancer where the cancer is stopping to grow and getting better.
Wow.
And so it's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 10, it's probably already not 20.
Wow.
And it's a very high percentage. And so yeah, it's exactly, it's a wow. But it's interesting how somebody who who is a great guy, amazing oncologist, not an expert at all in nutritional or alternative conventional one, but that's the one agent he's studying. So he said, okay, let's try it. It was opened enough. It's a lesson about being open. I wouldn't have done it. And sure enough, so I'm very excited. We just need to write it up now. It's a issue of time. The data is there. So as the interest came with cancer, I was observing in the late 90s that people's blood pressure were getting better, that people's joint pains were getting better, and the people's memory was improving. So I realized that there is an effect on inflammation and on circulation. And since then, there are a slew of studies showing the effects of galectin-3 on producing aortic stenosis, arteriosclerosis, and the benefits in animal models, dozens of papers of blocking Galectin-3 as a way to improve atherosclerosis. So you are seeing in animal models at least, and again, it's a reversal of atherosclerosis, a reversal of aortic stenosis. And I see in patients where I use a process called therapeutic apheresis, where I filter the blood from inflammatory compounds, and I combine with Galectin-3 blocker. I'm seeing in chronic kidney disease across the board improvement in kidney function. Again, it's something that a nephrologist, it's not in the radar. And part of it is that, people are built, we are programmed to have expectations, right? And the moment we have expectation, we are limiting the potential because, so if you talk to a nephrologist, they will tell you, oh, we have now great drugs. They really slow down the deterioration of chronic kidney disease, which is, Ari, and I wasn't aware until 6-7 years ago, 17% of the US population have chronic kidney disease. It's the most prevalent disease, the most expensive disease for Medicare, and people are not aware of it. Often not followed until it's too late. So we actually, and there are some studies showing improvement in chronic kidney disease, and that's one of my future projects. If I can offer something simple for chronic kidney disease, these are people who see a big sign on the door, dialysis, and often they're too old, they can't get a kidney transplant. So that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. So that's the atherosclerotic part. Now, because Galectin-3 drives the cytokine storm, because Galectin-3 through activating macrophage to become inflamed causes dysfunction of the insulin receptors, and because Galectin-3 can block insulin receptors, change p53 expression, but also affect AMPK, adenosine monophosphate kinase, the activator of normal mitochondrial function. So what happens, the moment that p53 is blocked, the cell goes into a survival mode, into a crisis mode. Mm-hmm. And so the cell has an inner signal inside, hypoxia, I don't have oxygen. I'm in trouble, I have to produce energy fast. And we move into glycolysis. So mTOR1 get activated, AKT get activated, and PDH get blocked by an enzyme called PDK, pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase. And then now the substance that causes energy to be produced very efficiently by the mitochondria is not being able to get into the mitochondria, right? It's pyruvate and oxalic acid, and then it starts moving in the Krebs cycle.
The quick summary for people who don't have a biochemistry background is we ideally want energy to be produced inside of our mitochondria, inside of the respiratory chain or the electron transport chain. We want carbohydrates and fats to be getting oxidized aerobically in the presence of oxygen in that process. And what he's saying is that, and this also it parallels the cell danger response, and it parallels a lot of work around that people have done in the field of cancer research also, is there's a shift away from mitochondrial energy production towards anaerobic glycolysis, towards this much less efficient process of producing energy outside of the mitochondria in the cytosol of the cell. And it produces far less ATP, and it also produces lactic acid as a byproduct. And that process occurs, just to add maybe one layer that it links up with this. Anaerobic glycolysis is a pathway, is an energy system of the cell that is used in higher intensity physical activity. So at low intensity physical activity, we predominantly rely on oxidizing carbs and fats from inside the mitochondria. And then as the intensity increases, we start to rely less on fats, rely more on carbohydrates. And then as the intensity increases beyond a certain threshold, beyond what the mitochondria can do in this aerobic process of energy production, then we start relying on this faster energy production of anaerobic glycolysis in the context of moderate to high intensity exercise, strenuous activity. So what Dr. Eliaz is talking about here is a shift towards that energy system at rest, not in the presence of high intensity exercise.
Exactly, it's a great example. Just to give people a sense what you mean, because for example, when we are in danger, it shifts immediately. We are talking about producing 100 times more energy at an efficiency of 5 to 6%, right? Instead of 36 ATP per glucose, 2 ATP per glucose. So if you multiply 100 by 20, we are consuming 2,000 times faster substrate. Glucose is produced 2,000 times faster. And that's why in cancer cells, we use this PET scan and it lights up when we get radioactive glucose. See glucose like similar compound. It's called SUV. It's because the cancer is using glucose so much. So this happens, as you said, anaerobic. The problem that in cancer, the cells goes into this mechanism even in the presence of oxygen. And that's aerobic glycolysis. It's the Warburg effect.
And there's also research in people with chronic fatigue syndrome showing that there's an increased reliance on that increased shift towards anaerobic glycolysis.
And the lactic acid and lower pH, and then it's a vicious cycle, because the moment the cell sends lactic acid, for the cell it means hypoxia, and then HIF, hypoxia inducing factor, goes up, and it even pushes stronger glycolysis. And this is something we can do for a short period of time. We know we can run at full speed for 100 yards if we are good, for 200 yards if we are an Olympic athlete, maybe for 400 meters, right? Then we're done. That's the same. So some of us live in this way. Can you imagine the inner stress? So the value of shift from different energy systems and the value of adaptivity is like keeping a rubber band flexible, right? If you don't use the rubber band, it's going to dry out.
Yeah.
But if you push the rubber band too much, it's going to get cut. And interesting, in the pulse, when we look at the pulse as an expression of longevity, you want the pulse to go up and down. And people who are trying to push their longevity in an imbalanced way, you will get a rubber band pulse, which the way you see it is that it gets stretched at the middle, and it gets soggy in the edges, and it gets soggy in the middle. Now, when you stretch a rubber band first, it stretches at the end, not in the middle. So this is the value of being able to be adaptive, being able to be flexible. And I was mentioning to you when I was a yoga teacher and I was in medical school at the same time, and I was noticing that people's blood pressure can get better when they just relax and meditate. But then it can get better when they exercise, when they put energy and they are moving, right? Two different things.
Hey, this is Ari, and if you enjoyed this little clip, I highly recommend checking out the full-length podcast by clicking the link down below this video in the description. Check it out. You're going to learn a ton more valuable information. Also, as always, I want to mention at the Energy Blueprint, we offer a ton of solutions to help you increase your energy, and as a side effect, help you prevent disease, dramatically improve your brain function, your mood, combating anxiety and depression, increasing your resilience to stress, and increasing your longevity. All nice bonuses to strategies designed to massively increase your mitochondrial function and your energy levels. And we've got a whole suite of products, online info products that guide you on strategies to optimize your lifestyle and nutrition habits. We've got an Eat for Energy course. We've got a brain course. We've got an advanced fat loss strategies course. We've got a breathing for energy course, which I highly, highly recommend. People just absolutely rave about that one in particular. And we've got a whole suite of supplements, mitochondrial formula, a brain formula, energy essentials and superfoods, which is our comprehensive multivitamin and multimineral and superfoods formula. So thank you for watching this. Again, full length link to the full length podcast is down below. And check out theenergyblueprint.com for our whole suite of products that can help you dramatically transform your energy levels.